certainly I want to thank Sandra and Ron for inviting me down. And Newton Running is sponsors this because Newton Running is a company that started in 2007. It started as a website, and they believe that actually there's a better way to teach people to run other than putting a big cushion on the heel. So when their company started, they had a principle that we should teach people running mechanics as part of the shoe. You know, the shoe's the shoe, but without teaching people how to run, it's probably still not going to work. And they were the first company to kind of go all in doing that. You know, it wasn't like a little side niche project. Let's experiment here, but this is the bulk of our market. It was, this was it. This was it. This was it. And and I started working with them about 5 years ago. Going out to some military institutions and to stores to try to teach staff and teach runners a little bit about what this natural running was. This is before Born to Run. This was really kind of weird talking about this stuff before people were talking about this stuff, and then things have kind of exploded. Since then, since Dan Lieberman and Chris McDougall, make the world news. Now, people are giving themselves permission to try it, to try to get out of a big bulky shoe. So Newton, in essence, are a charitable company. They give a ton back to the community, and they support these 2-day clinics like we're doing at Fort Stewart, in multiple places around the country. I'll go to about 2 bases a month and put on running seminars because in the military, I'm still an Air Force reservist. What happens if you can't run? Any active duty reserves here? And what happens to your job if you can't run? Yeah, you may lose your job. Yeah, worse, you get hurt. All these costs. So there's all these layers. So running actually, the military is embracing it as a skill set. And I just came off a 6-month project trying to build some internet-based tools. And you can't go to every single individual in every base and do one-on-one their courses. How many Air Force, Army. But we're trying to put some things out there that anyone could look at, watch, and do some drills and things. But we still don't know yet if that's going to work. Can people learn by reading and watching things? I don't know. It's a good question. Everything I've learned from a lot of other people. That's kind of how it is. We kind of learn, we experiment ourselves, and we pass it on. I want to thank Ron and Sandra, tremendously for all the hosting and bringing me down here, and really for what they're doing in your community. They're doing what I started in my community about 2 years ago. I honestly believed everyone could learn how to run without pain. How many of you all have had a running injury? Yeah, you probably wouldn't be here if you didn't, or you wouldn't be trying different things with shoes. But Sam's a PT, and she figured it out herself because she tried it, and all of a sudden it's like, I feel good. Let me think about why I feel good. And then, as a physical therapist, then you go back to your books again, and you study it. Okay, now I understand why this is so. Come back and play around a little bit more. But then, it takes a lot of courage to open a store like this that essentially only sells flat shoes. I opened a store in West Virginia, a town of 3,000, only sold flat shoes. People thought I was crazy. But I'm a doc, and my real field out in medicine is pediatric obesity and nutrition. And if I were to open a market, even if everyone came in and said I wanted the Fritos, I'm sorry, I wouldn't sell them in my store because I wouldn't think that's, try this, try it for 2 or 3 weeks, real food. Maybe your brain will shift a little bit. So it's kind of the same thing. It's like I wouldn't put something on someone's foot that I think is going to encourage a dysfunctional pattern. So we have, about 17 stores now in the country that do what Ron and Sandra are doing here, which is more about teaching, trying to fit individuals to the best shoe for them. We'll go through a little bit about shoes tonight, but when you do these community things, it's nice to kind of share some stuff that really captures just the spirit of why we run. So how many of y'all just want to live well, live better, live longer, not end up at the doctor's office on 15 medicines? Yeah, no kidding. I'm a family doc. My day job is a doc. And if people understood just a little bit about movement nutrition, they wouldn't need much of us. In medical school, we learn, any medical folks here, massage therapists, so medical folks. So we learn in medicine, we learn to treat disease. And that's what we do. We learn to treat disease. It's probably important, but we don't learn how to teach health, which is preventing disease. So that's another whole box. So really, the running is part of health. And so I get more passion out of that than treating the disease. I still do that in my day job, but this is kind of the fun side. Everything in this minimalist movement, running form movement, there's nothing new under the sun. This stuff goes way, way, way back. We're kind of resurrecting things that were known years and years ago. And I have a lot of mentors out there and people I've learned from, but probably the premier person that I've learned from is not alive anymore, but he influenced so many people. And I'm going to show you a movie which kind of captures some of the spirit of what he did. But there was a coach from New Zealand called Arthur Lydiard. Anyone heard of Arthur Lydiard? So Arthur Lydiard was a coach of Olympic champions in the early 60s from this little town in New Zealand. And in this little town in New Zealand, it wasn't different than any other small town. He was created 12 Olympic champions from this little town. And Bill Bowerman was the coach at University of Oregon at that time. Anyone familiar with the name Bill Bowerman? Yeah, what's Bill Bowerman's country's name?
Prefontaine.
Yeah, so he was coach of Prefontaine, and he was the founder of Nike. Founder of Nike. What's that?
I have some of those shoes.
Yeah, the old school shoes, yeah. So he was kind of the first one to build the shoes. Kind of more known for the shoe thing, because Nike obviously went big, and if you got stock back then, you probably...
Pegasus, I think, would be one from that, his name.
Yeah, Pegasus. It goes even further back. Created the first waffle shoe, which was one of my first running shoes. But he was, he was a coach, and he wanted to go figure out what this guy Arthur Lydiard was doing, to make all these Olympic champions. So he goes down to New Zealand one summer, and he sees this little group that's meeting under a tree. It was the original Auckland Joggers Club. It's about 1963, Auckland Joggers Club. And it was filled with cardiac patients. Filled with cardiac patients. And what did we tell people in America then to do when they had a heart attack? Rest. Yeah, you must rest the body, right? Rest. So those of you all in medicine now, what do we do now for cardiac rehab? What do we make people do?
They can move.
Yeah.
I've had a quadruple bypass.
So you
And
did,
I
what's your first name? Is
and now the surgeon started running. And he said, "No, I can't believe your heart."
Yeah, but believe it, because that's how, in any kind of field, science always catches up with what human experience kind of figures out. So when you did, after your bypass, what did you do for
Well, I never knew I had a heart attack. I mean, the guy behind me died, and I said, man, he and I the same age. I'm going to ask my diabetic doctor to get me an appointment. And I did. He said, man, you've had a massive heart attack, maybe two. When did all this happen? And then when he x-rayed me, he said, well, your exercise is, you bypass that. You started your own...
And you create capillarization. You
Yeah.
start to build these little roads. You start to build these capillaries everywhere. Yeah, so exactly. So Lydiard understood in the early 1960s that the heart was just another muscle that needed to be trained. But most of the training actually takes place at the muscular layer in the active muscles, not cardiac muscle. Then we just have contractile muscle. But that had massive adaptation. So now for cardiac rehab, we just tell people to walk, and then maybe run, and then progress. So he had all these cardiac patients there jogging. He made up a name for it called jogging. And so Bill Bowerman shows up with this kind of Olympic level runners to figure out what he's doing with his high-end runners. But then he joins this Lydiard cardiac group, and he lines up the first day and goes for a jog. And he's dropped on the first hill by this 76-year-old cardiac patient named Andy Stedman. So he's scratching his head. Bill was a 10th Mountain Division guy. So he's a pretty tough guy. He was probably pretty fit in those days. Any Army folks here? Yeah, the 10th Mountain Division was legendary, right? I mean, they were in the Italian Alps. They were the guys in bunny suits, that could march for miles and miles in the snow. Yeah, so he was one of those guys, really fit. So he's just scratching his head. So he's like, well, I'll just show up with these folks every day. So he shows up every day, and by the end of the summer, he's lost like 40 pounds, 5 inches off his weight. Feels like $1 million. Comes back to Eugene and starts the Eugene Jogging Club, which was a few people met on the track, then it was a few more, then it was a couple hundred, then it was a few thousand. Would meet every Friday at the track. Now, Eugene, Oregon now is known for what? like the running capital of America. But it all started with that. And then he wrote this book in 1967, Bill Bowerman. So this word was not in the U.S. lexicon in 1967. Jogging. So he wrote this book and sold, a couple million copies, and really culture changed. Culture changed after that time. And all through this book, Arthur Lydiard's all over this book. But this is just old school. You got ladies in their, kind of housewives outfits and the, rain suits, and they all were wearing these gum rubber shoes, like, a pair of those old Converse high tops. Every single page here it says, train, don't strain, train, don't strain. That's kind of the principle, whether you're just trying to get fit or whether you're an Olympic athlete. But everything that you need to know really is in this book. Yeah, it's 100 pages. You can get it for like 50 cents. So, yeah. In this book, and then if you want to kind of go to the next level, that book up there, this book is another one that I think anyone who's interested in this stuff has to read this book. This guy's also taught me more than by anyone. He's the guy who's alive who's taught me more than anyone. Arthur Lydiard's, he passed a few years back. But his legacy went on to this book too. So everything that was the Lydiard principles went into this book, which was 1968. So this book is called Aerobics. And this book was written by Ken Cooper, who was an Air Force flight doc. Now these two books had a very common theme to them because, nothing was fancy then, but they knew that people needed to make physical activity part of their daily, just part of their, like sleeping and eating. This was just part of what a human needed to do to stay well, to prevent disease. Now, both of these books, the minimum requirement, kind of the minimum level that they want people, anyone to achieve is how many minutes a day? 20 minutes, 30 minutes. That's what they wanted. The goal to be anyone to be able to go out and exercise comfortably, major muscle groups for 30 minutes. 20, 30 minutes. Gretchen Reynolds just wrote a book called The First 20 Minutes. She's the New York Times fitness writer. So what she means by the first 20 minutes is most of the health benefits occur in the first 20 minutes. So the ACSM, Institutes of Medicine, CDC, Exercise Medicine, all these big think tank groups produce this 1,000-page document about National Physical Activity Guidelines. And how many minutes a day do they recommend for the average 2011 massive document? I don't know how many people it took to put that together. That's pretty simple. How many minutes a day, after all these smart people get together, do they recommend in that National Physical Activity Guideline? 30 minutes a day. Yeah, they have all this stuff, and it comes down like one chart. Use large muscle groups 30 minutes a day, most days of the week. Period. So that's health. Now, occasionally I'll get on the monkey bars and go race a marathon. Is that healthy? The actual day of doing that? Because you'll see in the New York Times or something, there'll be some study that'll say, well, people that race marathons and ultramarathons, they actually have a higher mortality rate than people just in the sweet spot, running 20 or 30 miles a week. And they'll go, aha, that running stuff is bad. Do you think I'm shocked by that? No. Going out and hammering yourself every day, racing all out in these massive events every weekend is probably not good for you. But just that daily 20 to 30, minutes, that's the sweet spot. So that's kind of my message to, people in my community. I'm in West Virginia, which is the number 2 obese state in the country. We just need them to get off the couch and do the first 20 or 30 minutes. And then that'll go a long way to, helping them just be well. Because it's not about like winning marathons or winning races or any of that stuff. It's about staying well. And that's why, stores like this exist. But what I want to share with you, before getting a little bit, we'll talk a little bit about shoes, a little bit about running form. Everything you really need to know is in this video from Arthur Lydiard. This is a video from 1972. There's a little bit about the competitive side of running on this video, but I work with the Lydiard Foundation now, Lorraine Moeller, Nobi Hajizume, people that actually trained under Lydiard. They're doing seminars. We'll go and teach all these principles in a seminar. We've done about 4 of them now through the country. And all these modern coaching methods all are based on these principles that Arthur Lydiard taught. But one of the things I want you to catch in this thing, so there's a word out there in coaching lore called fartlek. Anyone know what that word means?
Like interval training.
Maybe. Go fast, go slow.
Yeah, go fast, go slow.
So that's kind of like a little modern interpretation. But at the roots of what that word means, what does it mean? Anyone? It came from a Swedish word. It means speed, play. It means speed, play. So, how do kids run? Yeah. They speed up, right? They feel good, then they stop, and then they speed up, and then they stop. So what is the definition of play? Just tell me what does play mean? Having fun. Anything else?
Non-competitive.
Non-competitive. Is there an outcome? No outcome. In the moment, no outcome. That is play. So, back in the day, runners did a lot of this speed play. They would just go over the hills and they felt good, and that's how kids run. They're speed up, slow down, speed up, slow down. So that's called fartlek. But kind of some of the modern, we're all workouts, type A. So now kind of the modern interpretation of fartlek is interval training. So okay, I got to sprint a minute, slow down a minute, sprint a minute, slow down a minute. Is that speed play? No, I'm kind of getting at the essence, not to say the interval training has a place, but just we've really kind of come full circle where, now everything has to be work and workouts. So what's the opposite of work? Play. What's the opposite of play? Work. How many of y'all are busy, busy, busy people? Like stress. Got to hammer my workout. So how does that fit with the brain? There's a whole brain science to play. There's a whole brain science. I mean, no kidding. How many of y'all remember when you were a kid, and if you could go out and just run around for 20 minutes at lunch, playing tag or whatever it was, that maybe dodgeball, which you're not allowed to do now, but you did better in school. Yeah, there's actually real literature to that. I mean, that's real. So if kids can do major muscle group movement without structure, totally unstructured, they do better. And then somehow we become an adult, now we don't do that stuff anymore. So I'm encouraging y'all to, when you take up running as a form of play. Now Lydiard, to go back to the heart patients, he knew that play aspect of running was important because it's anti-inflammatory. It's relaxing. There's neurochemicals released with that type of activity that help health. So he knew that they needed to move and they needed to play, but he didn't want them doing that speed play. He didn't want them sprinting. They just had a heart attack. So he invented what was called New Zealand fartlek. And what that was is, how many of y'all have just met on a Saturday morning or in an evening after work with a group, and you pick like the lowest common denominator. You pick the lowest person and you run with that person. Nice and mellow. And maybe a half hour goes by, 40 minutes goes by, and it was fun. Had a conversation. So that was kind of the effort level for the health, was that, he called that New Zealand fartlek. So he told all these cardiac patients who are all type A, he says, I want you to run, build up to 30 minutes, but this is the pace. I want you to be able to have a conversation. So play is really, really, really important for us. And there's a whole science of play, and our brain releases. How many of y'all just have a type of music that you like? And it's different. What kind of music do you like? Rock. And anyone has a different type of music they like?
Doors, relaxation station.
Yeah, relaxation station. So rock, the Stones or Zeppelin, you get alpha waves in your brain. There's these waves that go on that help your mood. Release dopamine. They play something that you like, and you put on Pandora, same thing. So alpha waves are also released. How many of y'all, if you go out on that nice mellow run, and watch it shut off, you haven't really thought about anything, and things are just coming into your brain, you feel better when you get back? How many of y'all have actually any morning runners in here? Occasionally does that alarm go off and you're still asleep and you really don't want to wake up? Okay, so you have a choice, right? You could go out if okay, I'm going to have a cup of coffee, you can go out the door, and the days that, okay, you maybe cut your sleep by 40 minutes, but you actually got the run in versus the day you didn't cut the sleep, I mean, you slept in, which day do you actually feel better? The run. Because that easy running, actually, your brain's producing similar alpha waves in that easy running. So, I mean, no kidding, you can actually cut a little bit of sleep. All of us are trying to figure that out. But can you do, at 6 in the morning, can you do high-intensity interval stuff? Would that put your brain in that same state that, like, later that afternoon you actually have more energy? Or if you did that kind of stuff, or you actually be pretty tanked in the day? Pretty tanked in the day. Yeah, so understand that that type of running gives back. You know, and it's true. I mean, and if you want a guy Rady, his name Joseph Rady, wrote a book called Spark, which has like 300 references about all this stuff. And yeah, so there's all kinds of writing and science literature. But I'm going to show a video. This is about an 18-minute video, but it brings together pretty much everything we're talking about in running. You know, you'll see people kind of hop and skip, but I'll walk you through a little bit as we go through it.